You're listening to The Insider. This is the official podcast for the City of Murfreesboro. I'm Mike Browning. Thanks a lot for joining us. Our guests today for the podcast are Assistant City Manager Sam Huddleston and Ryan Maloney of Griggs & Maloney Engineering and Consulting. Thanks for being our guest to discuss the exciting Town Creek project.
Thank you, Mike. Look forward to talking about one of my favorite projects, the Town Creek projects, and with Ryan here to give some additional insight.
So, Ryan, SBW Constructors, LLC of Goodlettsville, is on the scene. They're starting their work. They were the low bidder of the project. What are they doing? Describe that for us.
So right now, you know, the less fun parts of the project that have happened so far, and maybe least exciting, they've gotten site security taken care of, best management practices installed for stormwater and erosion control. And what gets to be a little bit more exciting is we're setting the stage for big things to come. But it's the mass excavation for the creek channel and several utility efforts, which are a relocation of water line along Front Street, and also underground electric, setting the stage for the poles along Broad, the electric poles along Broad, to be removed post-project.
One of the, I guess, natural questions that someone might ask as they're seeing the digging going on is, how do they do the digging without hitting the water or maybe hitting the culvert? Are they doing it side from it, or how do they go about doing that?
Some parts of the stream channel are in different alignment with the culvert. So what we're seeing right now in the excavation is a portion of what I call dry channel, which is, you know, away from the existing box culvert. As far as the rest of the utilities go, there's a lot of efforts that go into locating those and getting those marked on the ground so that we have the least chance to impact existing utilities. But it doesn't mean that they're not there. It doesn't mean that the best utility locator there is, which is a TRACO, doesn't find them. And so we've had a couple of small surprises, abandoned sewer system from 1950s that predated the Broad Street redevelopment project.
There was a gas tank under there as well, right?
We had some old fuel tanks from a service station that operated there in the maybe 60s, 70s, 80s. And so we expect to find more of those things as we go along with the project, and most of which we hope we know about, and we'll have a few surprises, I expect.
So when you say utilities, you mean both electrical lines and like sewer lines?
Yes, water, sewer, electric, communication, stormwater, all the like.
Okay. So Sam, the stream runs underground from the Discovery Center at Murphy Spring over to Cannonsburg. Why was it ever put underground in the first place?
Mike, you might recall before about 1950, Broad Street was not a thing in Murfreesboro. And our gridded street pattern that we see and enjoy around the square in downtown continued across present-day Broad Street into what we refer to as the historic bottoms. That area was 6 to 10 feet lower than it is today in elevation. It was a mixed use area, residential, shops, retail, industrial, but it was very low-lying land and flooded quite frequently. And when the Tennessee Department of Transportation decided to extend Broad Street through town, they needed to make sure it was not vulnerable to flooding, and so Broad Street raised the elevation through there and actually intercepted a portion of Town Creek's original alignment. And so Broad Street really started the relocation of Town Creek and placing it in culverts. We had some low, what I would call low water bridges and footbridges that existed in that area that were, in many cases, probably maintained by private property owners even before the city was an organized public works maintenance group. And so those allowed low water crossings, but they are flooded chronically, and it was, some people might consider it slums, blighted area. It was a low income, pretty tough place, quite honestly, to live and to conduct business. And so during that time, the city also undertook an urban renewal project the first urban renewal project in Murfreesboro. And it was the Bottoms Urban Renewal, and in that, the culvert was considered. Town Creek was placed partially in a culvert, realigned, and a new street pattern was developed on both sides of Broad and Church. And at that time, Town Creek was partially put in a culvert. As redevelopment continued in those areas, individual projects continued to add to the Town Creek system, eventually getting it encapsulated to its current extent today.
I don't know if this is a question you can answer, but Church Street was probably still there.
Was
back
there.
then.
Yes.
Did the creek run under Church Street, or how did it get to the
It
next
did.
section?
It did. We have some old maps, some old diagrams, some things that we've been able to find, and it shows on those maps locations where there were footbridges and vehicular crossings. And you got to think, Mike, in the time that this area was being utilized, post-Civil War and even pre-Civil War, the railroad track that runs west of this area was the primary source of transportation for commerce and goods in and out of Murfreesboro. And we were also still in the horse and buggy days. And so considering all those things, you know, the gridded street pattern and the form of transportation, rail and horse and buggy, really didn't need a lot, but there were areas where Town Creek crossed over. Each one of those roads that intersected the creek, there was some type of crossing there, although most likely it was a low water crossing and it was subject to frequent flooding and inundation.
So Ryan, in terms of what you've described so far, is there's a lot of digging going on right now, but you've kind of alluded to it. There's a lot more to it than just digging. There's the design and the things that they have already looked at to know where they're going to proceed. But maybe we should talk about some of these details, because it's not just the stream channel, but the demolition and the culverts you referred to. Kind of give us an idea of how much detail is there that maybe people wouldn't imagine or see.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of things underground that you might not appreciate after it's all said and done. At the end of the day, this project is several linear projects in one. So the most visible and advertised is the daylighting of Town Creek. But we've also got several hundred feet of water line relocation that's happening along Front Hickerson. We've got water lines that need to be lowered on the McDonald side of Church Street for that portion of the project to get the stream inverts where they need to be. We've got a sewer line repair and a redo of about 200 feet of sewer line that's happening. And then along with the creek that'll be very visible, there are park elements that are happening. So between Front and South Church Street, there's two plaza areas and a multi-use trail that I think is going to be really fantastic for the community, in that it connects the trails and the boardwalk system at Murphy Springs to the Cannonsburg Greenway trailhead. And so now we've got a pedestrian connection that runs through the project along the creek, which allows us or affords us to eliminate the existing sidewalk that fronts Broad Street, putting users through the linear park that's being created. And boy, there's a lot of other things too. I mean, when we talk about a couple of the elements in the creek, we've got a beach area plan, so that allows the public to access the creek itself and to get their feet wet.
Yeah, that's cool.
We've got two pedestrian bridges that cross the creek. A passive area that allows folks to, you know, whether they want to throw a frisbee, walk their dog, or have a picnic. What else, Sam? We've got two plaza areas.
That's what's been
again.
described as an urban park or a pocket park, I guess.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think back, Mike, when we hosted Uncle Dave Making Days in that area, and we had 25,000 folks in the Cannonsburg area, Town Creek in the middle of July was a very popular location. And many of the visitors to Uncle Dave Making Days would roll up their pant legs, take off their shoes, and enjoy a little bit of time in Town Creek. Because it's spring fed, it's still very cool. even in the summer months. And also because it's spring-fed, it is, in my opinion, one of the most stable and best sources of water that we have in our area, so much so that the original founders of Murfreesboro identified it as their water supply very early in Murfreesboro's history. In the reference reach that as Ryan and I and the other members of the design and project team looked at it, we considered that stretch of Town Creek through Cannonsburg as kind of a reference reach of stream. And so that's what we know, that's amount of water that will be flowing through there. We know that's the size of stream channel that wants to be, that Town Creek wants to be in. But with the other elements, the pedestrian elements, the old bridge, iron bridge across it, so we're taking some of those ideas and replicating them as we move through and upstream of Cannonsburg and tie into Murphy Springs.
So I guess in some ways you're trying to maintain some of the old character and implement it in this new development that you're implementing here in Murfreesboro.
Correct.
There's been references to urban stream restoration as part of this project, and I guess you can think about what that might be, but I thought, Ryan, you might describe that for us. What does that mean?
Sure. I think it's important to maybe understand what an urban stream really is, and these are waterways that I think, in a lot of ways, within populated areas that the community may have turned their back on. They can be streams that often exhibit. They quickly rise and fall. Now, Town Creek doesn't have that dynamic because it's fed by spring. But they have higher flows, elevated contaminant concentrations, and really what you see is a reduced habitat for aquatic organisms in a lot of those streams as well. So Town Creek in its current state exhibits many of those characteristics. It's buried, it's forgotten. That's the story of Town Creek.
And it's not seeing the light of day, which is a factor that you need for a vibrant system, right?
That's right, and that's where the term daylighting comes from.
Yeah. You wanted to add to that, Sam?
Well, I just yes, continuing with that idea that Town Creek was placed in the culvert system as we discussed in the 50s and 60s, and so it lost its streamside habitat. It lost sunlight coming into it, which is necessary for the food chain. You start with those small aquatic vegetation that serves as a food source and nutrients and shade for the water itself, and then that allows the microorganisms that exist in natural streams to exist, and then that at the very base of the food chain is established, all because we allow the daylight back in. Ryan and I have both had the opportunity to walk through the culvert system, and while it will have some aquatic life in there, it's not what you typically think of as a thriving stream. And the concept of turning our backs on it for decades or even centuries, I guess, society generally sees water as the common enemy. We keep it away, we put it away, we turn our back on it. But it's also so critical to us for water supply, for a healthy environment, and also just really many of the places that we think about, perhaps when we go on vacation or maybe areas we grew up with, they involved water. And so we're trying to emphasize and recreate some of that space through our downtown, but then that also allows that stream to naturalize again and to develop that streamside habitat with vegetation and shade, and the stream being open to the sunlight again will recreate that aquatic environment that you would expect in a thriving stream.
Were some of these environmental factors, habitat issues, ecosystem, not well enough known back then when they did it, or was it just that because of the road that was coming through and everything else, it just necessitated that it go underground?
Yeah, I think probably the first point you made is that we didn't fully understand the impacts of culverting systems, urban runoff, removing streamside vegetation, changing really the dynamics of streams to the extent we do today. And so when we encounter streams and wetlands today in projects, a lot more attention is paid to how we manage those resources, how we protect them, and how we mitigate our damages. What we're doing here is a stream mitigation project without the larger, say, public infrastructure or development project. This is a standalone, and I'm going to borrow a term that Ryan's used over and over, lift of the quality and the characteristics of that stream to more mimic what a natural stream would be.
Let's talk a little bit about the funding, because it's a significant investment for one thing, but the other aspect of it is that the federal government is contributing perhaps as much as 50% into the project, but it required, you know, that the city follow certain procedures and in order to secure that funding. So the federal stimulus funds for this stormwater development on this project, I think, is crucial to understand.
Sure. A few years ago, we were notified that we would be receiving $24.2 million in ARPA stimulus funds. Those had to be project-specific or use-specific to responding to the COVID epidemic. Also, the federal government allowed those to be used for green infrastructure. And generally, we would think of green infrastructure as being wet infrastructure, water, sewer, and in our case, stormwater. And so as we looked at how we would utilize that $24.2 million, we did pour a lot of it into some projects and some reimbursement of city costs and expenses that we incurred during COVID. We picked up some overtime pay for some of our emergency service and emergency response personnel. And we did some other things with that. But we also had the opportunity to enhance some infrastructure projects. And as we'll discuss in a little bit, you know, Town Creek's been a project we've been working on for almost 20 years now. And so we identified that as a potential project that we could use some ARPA funds for. As we worked through the decision-making process with the city administration and the mayor and council, we proposed to fund as much of Town Creek as we could from those remaining funds.
Let me ask you both this question. So who was most involved in dealing with the federal government when it came to this? And were both of you involved in that? Or, I mean, because what you imagine is that there's going to be a bureaucracy, and you've got to cross your T's and dot your I's, or you're not going to end up with the funding.
So ARPA funding was just a little bit different than most of the other federal funds that Ryan and I have the opportunity to work with. They sent us a check. So we deposited $24.2 million in an account. Those funds were released nationwide.
Because it was part of that COVID relief.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
And so our interactions initially, we didn't have to submit a grant application. We didn't have to lobby for the funding. None of that. It was allocated to communities based on size and need, and that was a nationwide process. And so that money was there, deposited in our account over two different terms. And so our interaction really resulted in reporting back primarily to the state agencies. The federal government, when they issue grant funds, they generally issue them through a department or an agency. Most of the time they'll make their way into the state government, and then we wind up as the local government interacting with our state counterparts.
Well, Ryan, did you ever have any fear that, especially once Elon Musk got involved in Doge and the government was cutting back on things, that there might be, like, they might pull some funding back? Or
Not in this instance. Several projects may have those concerns, but since,
not this one.
Since Sam mentioned those direct allocated ARPA funds that came to the city really didn't have quite the clawback that maybe some other funds that hadn't been released for different grants would have. You know, the stimulus that the city's applying to this project, it's going to be impactful and it's going to be meaningful, but Doge really wouldn't have the since those funds were already
the authority
produced.
or power to interfere into funds that were already
Right.
distributed.
And the strings that are attached on this have they're mostly inserted into into the contractor's agreement, into the subcontractor's agreements, and those provisions flow down, and they range from wage rates to certifications about how that company operates as a whole, whether that be, have you ever been disbarred, or have you ever had these particular elements applied to your business. And so while there is a possibility of a back-end audit, there's probably not a very likelihood of a callback.
There are state and federal, I mean, state and local funds involved, like State Street and Water Resources Department, our general fund. So it's not all federal funds. And I don't know, Sam, if you wanted to discuss that, but how that's all being utilized for different purposes.
Sure. We knew that the ARPA stimulus money would not cover 100% of the project, and so as we would do with any project, we identified the various funding sources before we even sent it out for bid. We made sure we had enough money identified, enough funding sources identified to cover the anticipated cost of the project. There's some very specific funds that we're using here, and that's because of some of the project elements that Ryan discussed earlier. And so our Water Resources Department, they have 70-year-old infrastructure in the ground there, and so this was an opportunity for us to upgrade and replace a water line that had been in the ground for 70 years. And so the Water Resources Department, they're funding the upgrades and improvements to the water and sewer system. It's a convenient time for us to get in and take a look at those. We're replacing a culvert on Front Street. That culvert has also been in the ground for 70 years and was showing some signs of deterioration. And so we're taking this opportunity to upgrade that culvert system while we're doing the other work. We're rebuilding a portion of Hickerson and rebuilding a portion of Front. Those involve state street aid dollars. We're doing some stormwater enhancements, and the stormwater utility fee was originally envisioned to take care of these types of stormwater projects. Although we couldn't fund all of it from the stormwater fund, some of the elements, some of the enhancements we'll be doing for stormwater, including adding stormwater quality elements into pipe treatment, those will be paid for out of the stormwater fund. And then the general fund and the CIP will cover the gap that all of our other funding sources didn't cover.
So much of what we've been discussing is maybe what the viewing public doesn't see. But when it's all completed, how will this enhance Murfreesboro? I know the mayor has kind of referred to it as transformational, but the vision that really started many years ago and it's coming to fruition, how is that going to change?
Well, Mike, it started as a failing infrastructure project. And maybe follow-up question, we'll talk about that one a little bit, but it really started as a failing infrastructure project. But we stood that on its head and said, let's use this opportunity as we're dealing with this failing infrastructure, understanding that the culvert that Town Creek is in is large enough for all of us to walk through. We'll get our feet wet, but in most locations, we won't bump our head against the top. So it's a very large culvert system. And by daylighting that town, by daylighting the creek instead of putting it back in a new culvert system, one, we're going to save some money, and two, we're going to create a space in this area. And so as you think about how downtown Murfreesboro is redeveloping, what we do see is the uses are becoming more dense and more intense. So more people, more activities in the same space. And unlike a suburban setting where you would have open space and backyards and things like that, open space in a downtown urban area is at a premium.
Hard to find, yeah.
Hard to find. Yeah. And so this gives us an opportunity to create that open space and that green space that will ultimately, and maybe I could say it this way, serve as the backyard of downtown residents and downtown workers and visitors.
And it comports with what makes Murfreesboro attractive in many ways, the greenway, the park system. It adds to that beauty that we have, the natural beauty.
That's certainly true, and each one of those parks in their context play a part. We can't put, for example, soccer fields along Town Creek. It's not the right space or the right place. And we do have places for soccer fields. But our design team and the folks that have the vision for this, as they look at it, they said, we can do something here that would make this a unique place, a good place, that would be an enhancement to the downtown for many years to come.
Ryan, how long will this process take, and maybe give us some of the highlights as the process goes forward?
Well, the ARPA funding that we discussed a moment ago, it has a requirement that the work be completed and the dollars be closed out associated with that funding at the end of 26. So December 31st, 2026, the ARPA funding must be expended and that part closed. Our project is currently slated to run until the fall of 2026, allowing some time for that closure process to happen for the city. What I expect you'll see as this goes forward is right now there's a heavy concentration on that Front Street, Broad Street location. There's a lot of things happening at once there with the creek and utilities, and I think what you'll see is this project move in phases and chunks. So when I say that, that corner is going to be developed almost to the full extent for the utilities and the creek portion of the project. Not necessarily the top side with the park elements and all the landscaping quite yet, but the road improvements and the like will be pretty much completed through that phase, and then they'll continually move forward, moving towards Murphy Springs through the project. And I think you'll see their site security fencing moving with that phased approach. And then at the kind of more towards the tail end, you'll see the finer points, finer elements come in, like the multi-use path, the irrigation, the landscaping, some of the things that are delicate and would be in the way of a major construction project that's still in progress.
As we wrap things up, we should probably discuss just how long this has gone on. And Sam, you mentioned something about at least a couple decades or more that this has been around. So or at least a large part of the career that you've had here in Murfreesboro. But people need to understand just how long some of these projects takes when it comes to the conceptualization, or when you discover the problem, then you have to do the conceptual design, then the design, and then construction. It's not a simple thing.
Can I kick this one off a little bit?
If you want, sure.
Oh, you to go.
If you take that one, yeah.
Well, I'm going to let Sam chime in on some of the history before I was involved, but in 2016, I began work on this, and it predated me by a long shot. The city was very visionary. Sam was a huge instrumental part of that, as well as city leadership. So, I mean, from my outside perspective, I commend the city of Murfreesboro and what they've been able to envision and be in the process of achieving right now. But in 2016, we started with the concept, and it was, I'll call it phase one of the project, which was just from Murphy Springs to South Church Street. And it was the shortest stretch of channel on the most and worst defending portion of the infrastructure that was failing.
This is the area where McDonald's is now, kind of, and then KFC was there.
Correct, Mike. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, we got to the point of maybe a year or two later of starting a hard design, going through the potholing of utilities and getting the surveys done, and had gotten to that this preliminary design phase where we were working with some adjacent landowners, and we had some property acquisition to manage, and really kind of got stalled out in that phase with working with surrounding property owners. And the ARPA dollars came about, of course, in 2020 timeframe, and when that happened, it was a catalyst for the entirety of the project.
Because that wouldn't have even been foreseen when you started this,
Not
right?
at all. We had envisioned phase two and had dreamt about it, I guess you'd call it that.
Correct.
But didn't see it as a reality at all. But when the ARPA dollars were factored in, it became something that made the project possible.
So kick that part into high gear, that's for sure. And so backing up a little bit, Broad Street was very impactful to Murfreesboro. As I mentioned earlier, before Broad Street, rail was the source of the primary source of transportation and commerce in and out of the city of Murfreesboro. Our road system was very poor at that time, and so post-World War II, Broad Street was very impactful. Now, thinking back about that, Mike, Town Creek was started to be placed in culverts in the early 1950s. It was being built and placed in culverts in concrete and galvanized pipe. Those have a design life, and by that I mean they don't last forever. And so we're post 50 years, 75, almost coming up on 75 years since those original, some of the original elements were built. And typical design life for a corrugated metal pipe is 50 years or less. It may be 75 to
So the
100.
timing's right too, right?
Timing's right. In fact, the real thing that started this was a collapse in the drive-through of KFC, and that was in 2007. And so to the extent we could repair a large culvert system like that in an emergency repair, it took some engineering, it took some ordering materials of very large precast culverts. And so in 2008, we did that emergency repair. It wound up taking about, from the initial failure till we could open the drive-through back up and make sure it's safe for traffic, about 9 months. So you wouldn't consider that much of an emergency repair. But a typical culverting project would take at least a couple of years to do. And so following that initial emergency repair, we knew we had some concerns in some of those reaches. So we evaluated that. We discovered some additional failures. We started doing the math on what it would cost to cut and replace and recover that system as we went. And in the late, maybe 2010, 2012 timeframe, that number was a pretty large number.
Are you saying it might have been more expensive to do it that way than the way you're doing it now?
The way we're doing it now.
And it's better, this way's better.
And so a former city engineer and Chris Griffith and before him Ken Hayes, former planning director Joseph Adelot, and I we sat around and brainstormed over several weeks and months about that, and out of that became this concept of daylighting the stream, letting the project mostly be pushed by development if it could, so that instead of us jumping out and getting in front of everything, that as we had a development or a redevelopment pattern, we could see portions of the stream enhanced as we went. And that was our original concept, and then over time, we became more aggressive in our approach in deciding that we needed to build it. And in 2016 or so, we formulated the Historic Bottoms land use plan. We went through those studies, and if you recall, out of that Historic Bottoms study, 3 big ideas were discussed that landed squarely in the city's responsibility. One of those was daylighting Town Creek. One of those was realigning the intersection of Front
Street and Broad.
Vine and Broad, and one of them was a pedestrian bridge. And so today we know Town Creek's under construction. The realignment of Front and Broad is in preliminary design phases, and a pedestrian bridge that crosses over Broad Street at
That's been bid, right?
It has
Or
not
is-
been bid. It's in preliminary design, environmental clearance as well. And so all 3 of those big ideas that came out of the Historic Bottoms study are progressing, and obviously Town Creek being out in front of those, where what we as designers look for is the day we break ground on that and we occupy that project with large equipment, and we start seeing come to reality something that we've been working on in concept and in design for many years
All
now.
those years of planning come to fruition.
It's
Yeah.
the reward.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
the reward.
Thanks so much for both of you being with us, Ryan and Sam, for discussing this. It's exciting. We can't wait to see it, be fully implemented so we can enjoy it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
You bet. We need to add, the City of Murfreesboro does have a website that gives you an idea of the project and the ongoing construction on the project. The webpage is at murfreesboro.tn.gov/Town Creek Project. We've been highlighting Murfreesboro's Town Creek Project with Assistant City Manager Sam Huddleston and Ryan Maloney of Griggs & Maloney on The Insider. This podcast originated from City Hall. Thanks for joining us on our multiple platforms, and you can watch it right here on YouTube as well. Our producer is Michael Nevels. Insider is the official podcast for the City of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I'm Mike Browning. Thanks for joining us.